Hello everybody and welcome back to a very special episode on Spell Slam. Today we're doing something pretty different, where we're taking a little break from our playing and we're taking some time to look at our deck properly and see what we've learned so far. This is something that was suggested to me by Pappy Popper, a regular commenter and YouTuber, and I thought it was a great idea, and so here we are. We've got a few things that have changed since the beginning, obviously, and this is, again, one of the things that I really like about what I do here on Spell Slam is that I'm going to take a deck, I'm going to do a deck tech on it, but as I play, and as I evolve and as I, learn more about the deck, I tend to think that I should add things, remove things, and let the deck, get better as a result, which is not something that you see with many other channels on YouTube. So, one of the main additions with this deck has been the addition of Volatile Fjord. Actually, I can show the preview pane here. Hey. Okay, so you can see the card in big. So, Volatile Fjord, obviously a huge inclusion for the deck that I had originally missed and makes cards like Lava Dart much, much stronger. Very, very, very powerful inclusion that, was an obvious omission on my part. So that one went in immediately. But aside from that, the deck has not changed all that much, aside from a couple other little things on the sideboard, like Artful Dodge and Deface. And, I have been very happy with the sideboard. Thermo Alchemist has been great. Flaring Pain, not seen any use, but maybe it should go down to one copy. And this is something that I'd like my commenters on YouTube to get involved with, is I'd like to hear your opinion on how the deck is doing so far. And that can be, just about anything, whether you think there's some main deck inclusions that you think need to change, whether it has to do with the sideboard. Like, I've put these 4 cards aside here, like Deface and Hydroblaster, have been the cards that have been kind of doubting in my sideboard, and I think could probably go in favor of something else. And I've actually gone back through all the comments in this series with Eye Candy so far, and I've actually compiled a list of all the suggestions that have been made, including some of the suggestions that I've thought of for my own deck. And I put them here in the tapped out version of the deck so that they're all kind of in one place. There's something called a maybe board option, which is very, very useful when you are deck building. In addition to that, I've also put either a 1 or a 2 next to these cards. The 1 means that this is a card that's either been suggested or that I've thought of, but I have not yet found an actual place for in the deck, or I'm not sure if they even belong in the deck. And the 2 represents a direct swap with something else in the deck. So one of the main inclusions that I actually thought of myself was Bargain, which is kind of an interesting card from Throne of Eldraine. It's 1 red mana, it's an instant, and it gives target attacking creature +2/+2 until end of turn, but it also gives each attacking non-human creature trample until end of turn, which is basically all of our creatures, if you count the flipped Delver of Secrets that turns into an insect. Oh, it's still a human! Oh, so this card's probably a no-go. I thought it gave Delver of Secrets trample, but no, it stays a human on the other side. I'd never noticed that. All right, well, scratch that idea. So we've got Dispel as well, which is something that I've been playing this deck for years, and Dispel has often been in the main deck and in the sideboard, and I only took it out for this specific iteration, trying to go more mono red, with a slight blue splash, and so Dispel kind of made its way out of the deck, but this is something that I could definitely see going back in place of something like Hydroblast, which has been a lot more narrow than I would have liked. That's not a card that I've been particularly impressed with. You haven't seen me board it in or use it all that often, though it is a very, very powerful card. And again, note that Hydroblast and Pyroblast can target absolutely anything. You can target a green spell with Hydroblast and it just won't do anything, but it still lets you pump up your team, right? So Hydroblast is never a dead card per se, but has it been good? Not really. A very early suggestion has been Guerrilla Shaman, which obviously is artifact destruction used to, kill artifact lands for 1 mana. It would be very expensive to kill a Bonder's Ornament. In fact, it'd be a little bit unreasonable to do so with Guerrilla Shaman, but it does have its purpose. It is an absolute killer versus versus decks that run artifact lands. So definitely something to keep in mind. And I put a 2 next to this because it does, directly compare with Deface, which is a sorcery that destroys an artifact or a creature with Defender. And the reason I went for Deface is because it actually does trigger our Killing Fiend and Nivix Cyclops as opposed to Guerrilla Shaman that doesn't. Though, to be fair, Guerrilla Shaman can do a lot more damage than Deface could. I have liked Deface for the ability to destroy Defender, and I feel like this could come up against cards like Mnemonic Wall or the Walls deck that plays a Tuk Rubble Fort, which is one of their main ways that they kind of go off with their strategy. The only disadvantage with Deface is that it's a sorcery, which makes it a lot less useful to prevent someone from comboing off, as they can often just go Tuk Rubble Fort and then go from there without you being able to cast your Deface in response to any other spells. So yeah, a little bit on the fence about this card, though the 1 mana and multiple options makes this quite good still, in my opinion. We've obviously got Gutshot here. I've been loving the Phyrexian mana costs in this deck, and having free spells is awesome, seriously awesome, and Gutshot has lots and lots of great applications, killing fairies and unflipped delvers and just getting in for those last points of damage. It's a very, very powerful card, and in this deck in particular, you can pay the 2 life or you can pay the red mana, so it's still quite flexible, and it doesn't have to be painful like something like Mutagenic Growth, for example. That being said, I don't see a direct comparison with this card and anything else in the deck in terms of how it functions and what it's for. Like, I guess the closest thing would be Lava Dart in a way, but Lava Dart is not the same. It's a free spell that generates advantage, and it's not just 4 damage with a Kiln Fiend, it's 8 damage with a Kiln Fiend, which is massive. It's a huge difference. So in terms of Gutshot, I could see it taking the place of certain cards on the sideboard maybe, but would I play a full playset? Would I play it as a 2 of? Would that be enough? Would that actually make an impact on in sideboarding games? Maybe. There are lots of games where a Gutshot would make a big difference. Like, for example, versus Elves. Basically any matchup where Lava Dart is good, you'd want maybe those extra 2 Gutshots. So that could be something worth keeping in mind. In the same vein as Guerrilla Shaman, Abrade has also come up as a potential card to have as the artifact destruction slot. This one I like a lot. Abrade is probably one of the better removal spells to have come out in the last 3 or 4 years, but it is 2 mana, but it is an instant. It does kill creatures, and it does kill artifacts. It doesn't do what Guerrilla Shaman does. It doesn't do what Deface does, but in some ways, it's better than Deface. I wouldn't say it's better than Guerrilla Shaman. They still serve slightly different purposes, but worth keeping in mind as well. So I'd like to hear what your comments are about this debate on Abrade versus Guerrilla Shaman versus Deface. Recent suggestion has been Fling, and I can see huge arguments for this card, as it's basically like our Temur Battle Rage, right? Because Double Strike will double your damage, and Fling will also double your damage at the cost of sacrificing your creature. But if you're winning the game, it doesn't matter. The advantage that Fling has over Temur Battle Rage is that it does not use combat to deal the damage. So decks that are running Stonehorn Dignitary, or that can gum up the board really well, or that can potentially fog forever, Fling will do a number on them. It doesn't double your damage in that case, but it can still finish off a game very, very easily. I can see a few swaps for this card. One of the most obvious is taking out something like Thermo Alchemist or potentially Artful Dodge, because Artful Dodge will fill the role of something like Apostle's Blessing or Temur Battle Rage with the evasion, but it won't be as good against things like Stonehorn Dignitary or Fogs, whereas Fling will. I could also, say Hydroblast, maybe as an ineffective sideboard card, could be replaced with more flexible cards like Fling or Abrade or Gutshot. This Hydroblast seems like a decent swap for just about anything, really. Again, in that argument for artifact hate, we've got Shenanigans. This is a 2-mana sorcery, so again with a sorcery problem, but not a huge deal. What I like about this one is obviously the dredge. What this means is that I could basically guarantee that I draw a spell for the rest of the game, provided that I have targets for Shenanigans, right? Which means that I'll never be out of gas completely for Nivix Cyclops and Kiln Fiend, which is a very interesting thought. And Dredge 1 could also be powerful in that, you could mill a Lava Dart if you wanted to, or milling a Faithless Looting could be very, very useful as well. Oh, geez, that one's ugly. Whoa. Yeah, so the Dredge still has some applications in the deck, which is fantastic. Another very early suggestion for the deck was Ophidian Eye. And this one, I guess, could also be Tandem Lookout. I don't think I own any copies. So you could take a look at Tandem Lookout here. It's the same basic principle where you would soul bond this with your creature, Thermo Alchemist, so that you can basically just tap it to deal a damage and draw a card. And this would be the exact same thing with Ophidian Eye. You would enchant your Thermo Alchemist with it so that you can tap it and draw a card. The Ophidian Eye has the advantage of having flash, but it is a lot more fragile to having the Thermo Alchemist removed, whereas having the Tandem Lookout, well, I mean, it is a fragile 2/1 for 3 mana, but it would take a little bit more to break up a combo. And I wouldn't scoff at having Tandem Lookout and Delver of Secrets, for example, and flipping it and being able to draw cards and having them take a lightning bolt to the face every turn seems pretty good. So some merit to Ophidian Eye and or Tandem Lookout. I'd like to hear what people have to say about this card. It could be very interesting to have. Again, not super powerful if we're running up against heavy removal decks, which is already something that we're weak to, so maybe not the best thing to think about necessarily, but something worthwhile perhaps. Last thing that I thought of was Fireblast. This was in the original list. I was actually running like 3 islands and like 10 or 11 mountains, and this is while I didn't have the Volatile Fjord in the deck. I was brewing this list for the channel well before Volatile Fjord was printed. So Fireblast was definitely in the discussion, and even more so now that I'm basically running 12 mountains in the deck, and that makes Fireblast a lot easier to cast. We're obviously never going to cast this for 6 mana, but you can sacrifice the 2 mountains to deal 4 damage to anything, which, with a Nivix Cyclops or a Kiln Fiend, again, equals 7 damage. So this can kill people from very, very far well, and can also serve as removal in a pinch if you need it to. There have been a few games where, being flooded has been not so great, and being able to sacrifice those mountains for profit would have been really, really nice. So Fireblast, another potential inclusion. I could see it in the sideboard. I could see it in the main deck. I'm not sure where. So I don't know if this was a useful video or if it was completely boring, but these have been kind of my thoughts about the deck so far. I've been, really drawing from my comments on the YouTube channel and on the videos that I've been really, really appreciating as usual. So now it's your turn again. I've exposed some ideas to you. I've talked about it. I'm going to give us a few days to think about it together and talk about it in the comments, and I'd like to get you involved as much as possible. Let me know, what do you think would be great for this deck? What kind of swaps would you like to see? I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.